I pulled the dusty file folder from the bottom drawer of my desk, the one I'd been avoiding for 3 years. The label read, "Missing Person, Sector 7, Case Closed," in my own handwriting, but I knew better than anyone that nothing about this case had actually been closed. "What's that one about?" Melvin asked, looking up from the stack of incident reports I'd given him to review. Kid was eager, I'd give him that. Too eager, maybe. "Training exercise," I said, sliding the folder across the desk. "Tell me what you think happened here." Melvin opened it and began reading. I watched his expression shift as he worked through the details. The initial missing person report, the search grid maps, the medical evaluation. All the official paperwork that made it look like a routine case with a happy ending. 8-year-old boy disappeared during family camping trip in Sector 7, he read aloud. Massive search operation, 40 rangers plus search dogs. Found 3 days later beside Clearwater Creek, approximately 5 miles from the original search zone. Keep going. Says here the terrain between the campsite and where you found him is basically impossible to cross. Steep ravines, thick brush, no established trails. Melvin flipped through the photos. But look at this kid's clothes. They're spotless. Not a tear, not even dirty. How does someone walk 5 miles through that kind of terrain and come out looking like they just left the house? Good question. What else? Core body temperature of 89 degrees when you found him. That's severe hypothermia territory, but the medical notes say he showed no symptoms. No shivering, no confusion, normal speech patterns. Melvin looked up at me. That doesn't make sense. At that temperature, he should have been barely conscious. I leaned back in my chair. What did the boys say happened to him? Melvin found the psychological evaluation report. Dr. Jonathan Carpenter interviewed him twice. Kid barely talked, just kept mentioning something called the fuzzy man, who supposedly kept him warm and safe. Carpenter noted that the boy seemed emotionally detached, as if he was describing someone else's experience. And then? Family moved away 2 weeks later. No forwarding address, left all their belongings behind. Melvin closed the folder. Betty, this is weird as hell. What really happened out there? I grabbed the folder back and slipped it into the drawer. That's exactly what happened. 8-year-old boy went missing. We found him 3 days later. He went home safe. But the details don't add up. The terrain, the temperature, the condition of his clothes. And what's this fuzzy man thing about? Sometimes cases in the wilderness don't follow normal rules, Melvin. Sometimes you find people in places they shouldn't be, in conditions that don't make sense, with stories that sound impossible. Melvin looked unhappy. So what are you saying? That we just accept it and move on? I'm saying that protecting people sometimes means accepting mysteries rather than solving them. I pulled out another stack of files. There are things out here that don't fit in neat categories, things that don't respond well to investigation or publicity. That sounds like giving up. No, that sounds like 23 years of experience. I met his eyes. You want to know what I learned from that case? Sometimes the best outcome is when everyone goes home safe, even if you can't explain how or why. Sometimes asking too many questions puts more people at risk. Melvin grabbed another file. Are there more cases like this? Enough. I watched him flip through incident reports, seeing his confidence waver as he read. The forest has its own rules, Melvin. Our job isn't to understand everything that happens out here. Our job is to keep people safe and get them home to their families. But how do we keep people safe from things we don't understand? By learning to recognize when something doesn't feel right. by trusting your instincts when a situation seems off, by knowing when to back away instead of pushing forward. I tapped the closed drawer. That boy's family made the right choice. They took their kid and got out. Sometimes that's the smartest thing you can do. Melvin stayed silent for a while, flipping through another case file. The official reports don't line up with what you're saying. Official reports serve a purpose. They document what happened in ways that make sense to people who weren't there. But the real story is usually more complicated. So what's the real story with the boy? I looked out the window at the tree line beyond the parking lot. The real story is that something in Sector 7 took care of that kid for 3 days, kept him alive in conditions that should have killed him, then left him where we could find him. What really happened is that his family understood they'd encountered something beyond normal experience and made the smart choice to leave. And we just let that thing stay out there? What would you suggest? Post warning signs about mysterious entities that keep lost children safe? Launch an investigation into supernatural phenomena? I shook my head. Some things are better left alone, Melvin. Some mysteries protect themselves. He closed the file he'd been reading. This isn't what they taught us in training. Training covers the normal stuff. The lost hikers, the broken bones, the weather emergencies. But this job has other aspects that don't fit in textbooks. I stood up and walked to the window. You'll learn to recognize them. The question is whether you'll learn to handle them properly. What happens if I don't? I thought about the rangers who'd pushed too hard, asked too many questions, tried to solve things that didn't want to be solved. Then you'll find out why some of us develop a healthy respect for the unknown. Melvin gathered up the files. So what's my takeaway here? Just accept that weird stuff happens and don't ask questions. Your takeaway is that protecting people sometimes means protecting them from information that could put them in danger. That boy's family is safe somewhere else now. That's what matters. And if something like this happens again, then you follow protocol. You search, you rescue, you get people home safe. And if the details don't add up perfectly, you focus on the outcome instead of the explanation. I turned back to face him. The forest keeps its secrets for good reasons, Melvin. Our job is to work around them, not expose them. He nodded slowly, but I could see the questions still spinning behind his eyes. That was fine. Questions were natural. It was the answers that got people into trouble. I was explaining proper radio protocols to Melvin when Lloyd Hall came running up the trail toward us, moving faster than I'd seen him move in years. His face had that tight, focused look that meant trouble. "Betty, I need to talk to you," he said, barely winded despite the pace. "Found something about a quarter-mile back that doesn't belong." Melvin straightened up, probably thinking this was another training opportunity. The kid was always ready to dive headfirst into whatever came his way. "What kind of something?" I asked. Lloyd looked at Melvin, then turned back to me. "Wooden staircase, right in the middle of the forest, maybe 15 steps high. Looks like it was built yesterday." My stomach dropped. "Show me exactly where." Lloyd pulled out his worn notebook and drew a quick map. Due north from the old lightning-struck oak, maybe 200 yards into the thick stuff. Things just standing there like someone dropped it out of the sky. "A staircase?" Melvin looked between us. "Like from an old cabin or fire tower?" "No," Lloyd said firmly. "This isn't left over from anything. Clean wood, perfect joints, not a scratch on it. Doesn't match anything that should be out here." I looked over Lloyd's map, knowing the area well. Thick pine trees everywhere, no real paths. Certainly not a place you'd put up anything that was meant to last. Did you get close to it? Close enough to see it clearly, but Betty, Lloyd's voice dropped. I wanted to climb it. Really wanted to. Had to force myself to back away. That confirmed what I'd been afraid of. Good. That was the right call. Melvin made a face. What's the big deal about some old stairs? Probably just debris from a construction project. It's not debris, I said. Lloyd, you're not the first ranger to find something like this. Anthony Haley reported one last year in Sector 5, took photos, documented everything properly. When he went back the next day, it was gone. Gone how? Melvin asked. Gone completely. No trace it was ever there. I looked at Lloyd. Francis Peters dealt with these things for years before he retired. His rule was simple. Observe from a distance, document the location, but never make physical contact. Lloyd nodded. That tugging sensation was intense, Betty. Like something was drawing me up those steps. What pulling feeling? Melvin's voice had an edge of frustration. You're talking about this like it's supernatural or something. I met his eyes. Some things in the forest don't follow normal rules, Melvin. This is one of them. But there has to be a logical explanation. Maybe it's some kind of psychological effect from being alone in dense woods. Or maybe the construction is more recent than it looks. Lloyd shook his head. Kid, I've been working these woods for 20 years. I know the difference between normal and not normal. This was definitely not normal. So what do we do about it? Melvin asked. We report the location and establish a boundary, I said. Half-mile perimeter minimum. No rangers go near that area until further notice. That seems like an overreaction. It's exactly the right reaction. I turned to Lloyd. I need you to spread the word to Owen and the other veterans. Make sure everyone knows to avoid that sector. Will do. Lloyd tucked his notebook away. What about the official report? Standard documentation. Unusual structure found. Area marked for safety assessment. Keep it simple. Melvin looked like he wanted to argue, but something in my voice must have stopped him. How many of these staircase things have people reported? Enough, I said. They show up randomly, different sectors, different times of year. Never in the same place twice. And they all disappear? Every single one. I started walking back toward the main trail. Lloyd, thanks for handling this properly. Not everyone would have had the sense to back away. That pulling feeling was real, Betty. Whatever's going on with those things, they want people to climb them. Which is exactly why we don't. I looked at both men. Some mysteries in the forest protect themselves by staying mysterious. Our job is to respect that and keep people safe. Melvin stayed silent for a while. So we just pretend it didn't happen? We acknowledge it, document it, and work around it. That's how you survive 23 years in this job. I checked my watch. Lloyd, get that report filed before end of shift. Melvin, we're heading back to finish your radio training. As we walked away, I could feel Melvin's questions building up behind his eyes. That was fine. Questions were natural. It was the answers that got people into trouble. But Lloyd's description of that pulling feeling bothered me more than I'd let on. The stares were getting stronger, more demanding. That wasn't a good sign for any of us. The radio buzzed to life at 6:47 a.m., waking me up in the ranger station bunk room. Betty, we've got a missing hiker. Christina Moore, 29, solo backpacker. Last seen yesterday evening on the Whispering Ridge Trail system. I was lacing up my boots before the message finished. 12 hours missing in that terrain meant we were already racing against time. Copy that. Getting search teams together now. Melvin showed up in the doorway, hair messy but already grabbing his equipment. Caught the call. What's our plan? Standard grid search, but we move fast. I grabbed my pack and radio. Get Bradley Cox and tell him to bring the tracking dogs. We'll start from the last known position and work outward. The morning air bit at our faces as we hiked toward Whispering Ridge. Christina Moore's car sat alone in the trailhead parking lot, a blue Honda with Colorado plates and hiking stickers covering the rear window. Her registration showed she'd planned a 3-day solo trip through the backcountry. Experienced hiker, Bradley noted, checking her permit. She's got proper gear, filed a detailed route plan. This isn't some weekend warrior who got in over her head. The dogs caught her scent right away at the trailhead. We followed them through thick pine forest, their excited barking bouncing off the canyon walls. Christina had stayed on the main trail for the first 2 miles before heading off into unmarked territory. Why would she leave the main route? Melvin asked, studying his map. Could be anything, I said, though unease was building in my chest. Wildlife photography. Better camping spot. Shortcut that turned into a wrong turn. We pushed through thick brush for another hour, the dogs pulling us deeper into terrain that grew harder to navigate. Fallen logs blocked our path every few yards, and the tree cover overhead filtered sunlight into shifting patterns that messed with your vision. The dogs stopped suddenly in a small clearing, whining and backing away from something ahead. I called for the team to halt and moved forward to see what had spooked them. 15 wooden steps rose from the forest floor, leading up into empty air above the tree line. The structure looked identical to what Lloyd had described. Clean lumber, perfect joints, not a scratch on it. It stood there like someone had dropped it from the sky. What the hell is that? Bradley stared at the staircase. Some kind of old fire tower foundation? No, I said, my mouth going dry. Everyone back away. Now. Melvin moved closer instead, pulling out his camera. Betty, this could be connected to Christina's disappearance. We need to document everything. Melvin, get away from that thing. It's just wood and nails. He circled the base, taking photos from different angles. Probably left over from some old construction project. Maybe Christina climbed up to get a better view and fell. I grabbed his arm. We're setting up a perimeter 50 yards back and continuing the search elsewhere. That doesn't make sense. Melvin shook me off. If she's injured somewhere around here, we need to check every possibility. Bradley examined the staircase with professional interest. The construction looks recent, but there's no access road. How would anyone get materials this far into the backcountry? It doesn't matter how it got here. I keyed my radio. All teams establish search perimeter around grid reference 77 Alpha. Do not approach the structure in the central clearing. Betty, you're not thinking clearly. Melvin's voice carried that edge of frustration I'd been hearing more often lately. We've got a missing person, and you want us to ignore potential evidence because of some old stairs. Those aren't old stairs. Then what are they? I looked at the structure rising perfectly clean and straight from the forest floor. There's something we don't approach. End of discussion. Melvin shook his head and started walking toward the staircase. I'm going to take a closer look. Maybe there's a view from the top that'll help us spot Christina. Melvin, stop. But he was already at the base, 1 foot on the bottom step. See? Just regular wood. Nothing supernatural about it. The moment his boot touched that first step, something changed in his expression. The doubt drained from his face, replaced by a dreamy sort of focus. He took another step up. Melvin. He didn't respond. His movements became mechanical, purposeful, like he was following instructions only he could hear, step after step, climbing steadily toward the top. I ran after him, but some invisible force pushed back against me, as I got close to the staircase. The air felt thick, hard to move through, like trying to walk underwater. "Melvin, get down from there." He reached the 7th step, then the 8th. Bradley was shouting something behind me, but the words sounded muffled and far away. Everything narrowed down to Melvin climbing those strange stairs. At the 10th step, he stopped and looked back at me. For just a moment, his eyes cleared and I saw confusion there, maybe even fear. His mouth opened like he was trying to say something. Then he took the final steps to the top. Melvin stood on the highest step for maybe 3 seconds, looking out over the trees. Then he screamed, a sound of pure terror that cut through the morning air like a blade. Something massive and black dropped down from above the staircase. I caught a glimpse of twisted limbs and reaching claws before Melvin was yanked backward off the platform with tremendous force. His body hit the ground 20 feet away with a sound I'll never forget. The crash should have been enough to break bones, but what I saw when I reached him was far worse than any fall could cause. Melvin's neck was twisted at a horrible angle. Deep claw marks raked across his chest and arms, tearing through his uniform like it was paper. Blood pooled beneath him, soaking into the pine needles. I dropped to my knees beside him, checking for any sign of life, but his eyes stared sightlessly at the trees above. Bradley was on his radio, calling for emergency medical response, his voice shaking as he tried to explain our location. When I looked back toward the clearing, the staircase was gone. Nothing remained but disturbed earth and scattered pine needles where it had stood moments before. What happened? Bradley knelt beside me, staring at Melvin's body. What could have done this? I couldn't answer. The claw marks were too deep, too precise. The force required to throw a grown man 20 feet through the air was beyond anything that should exist in these woods. The emergency responders arrived 40 minutes later, hiking in with medical equipment and body bags. The paramedic took one look at Melvin and shook his head. "Massive trauma," he told the investigating officer. "Broken neck, severe lacerations. Looks like he fell from significant height." I stood apart from the group, staring at the empty clearing where the staircase had been. How could I explain what really happened? How could I tell them about the thing that had taken Melvin? The investigating officer approached me with his notebook ready. "Ranger Dean, can you walk me through what occurred here?" I looked at Bradley, who was pale and shaken but nodding slightly. He understood. Some things couldn't be put in official reports. "Ranger Watkins was examining a structure we found during the search," I said. "He climbed up to get a better view and fell. The impact was severe." "What kind of structure?" "Old wooden stairs, probably left over from a fire tower or hunting platform." The officer looked around the clearing. "Where is it now?" "Collapsed when he fell. The wood was rotted through." It was a lie, but it was the only explanation that would make sense to people who hadn't been there. The truth would sound like madness. They loaded Melvin's body onto a stretcher and began the long hike back to the trailhead. I followed behind, my mind replaying those final moments over and over, the way his eyes had cleared just before he reached the top. The terror in his scream, the thing that had dropped down from nowhere to tear him apart. We never found Christina Moore. The search continued for 3 more days, but it was just going through the motions. Whatever had taken Melvin had probably gotten her too. I filed my report that evening, sticking to the official story about a tragic accident during search operations. But I knew the truth. The forest had claimed another victim, and I'd been powerless to stop it. 23 years of experience, and I still couldn't save the people who counted on me to bring them home safely. I was checking trail conditions in Sector 4 when I spotted Grace Silva sitting on a fallen log, her hiking pack beside her and her head in her hands. She looked up when she heard my footsteps, and I could see the tiredness in her dark eyes. "Thank God," she said, standing quickly. "Are you a ranger?" "Betty Dean. What's the problem?" Grace looked around nervously. "I've been hearing sounds for 2 days. Clicking sounds. They follow me wherever I go." I kept my face blank. "What kind of clicking?" "Rhythmic. Mechanical. Like big insects or skeleton fingers tapping on wood." She shivered despite the warm afternoon. "I know how that sounds, but I'm not imagining it." Grace had the look of someone who spent serious time outdoors. Quality gear, confident posture, the kind of tan that came from months on trails, not the type to freak out over normal forest sounds. "When did it start?" "First night at my campsite near Devil's Creek. Thought it was just branches in the wind, but it kept going even when the air was completely still." She shouldered her pack. "Yesterday it got louder, more insistent, like whatever's making the noise is getting closer." I'd heard enough. "Let's get you back to the main trail." We started walking toward the main path, Grace staying close beside me. For the first few minutes, everything seemed normal. Birds calling overhead, wind moving through pine needles, our boots stepping on dry leaves. Then I heard it. Click, click, click. Click, click, click. The sound matched Grace's description perfectly. Steady, purposeful, absolutely not natural. It bounced around us from all directions, ricocheting off the surrounding trees. Grace grabbed my arm. "You hear it too, right? I'm not crazy?" "I hear it." I kept walking, but my hand moved instinctively to my radio. The clicking was getting louder as we moved, keeping perfect pace with our steps. "There," Grace pointed up into the canopy. "Something's moving up there." I followed her gaze and caught a glimpse of something large moving between the branches overhead. Too big to be a bird, moving too deliberately to be wind-blown debris. Whatever it was stayed hidden in the shadows, but I could sense it tracking our movement. The clicking intensified. Click, 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 click. Faster now, more urgent. Grace's breathing was getting shallow. It's been doing this for 2 days. Following me, watching me. I can't get away from it. We pushed through a thick stand of pines, and I spotted the wooden staircase blocking our path ahead. 15 steps climbing straight up into empty air, the wood looking like it had been built yesterday. "We go around," I said immediately. "Around what?" Grace was staring at the structure. "What is that thing doing out here?" I guided her in a wide circle around the staircase, keeping as much distance as possible. The moment we passed the structure, the clicking stopped completely. Grace blinked, looking confused. The sounds, they're gone. The heavy feeling that had been building around us lifted like fog burning off in sunlight. Grace's shoulders relaxed, and the panicked edge left her voice. "I don't hear anything anymore," she said, sounding almost surprised. "How is that possible?" I keyed my radio. "Base, this is Betty. I need pickup at the Sector 4 trailhead. One hiker requiring escort out." "Copy that, Betty. ETA 20 minutes. We kept moving toward the main trail, finally getting some peace and quiet. Grace couldn't stop looking around, expecting that clicking noise to start up again. But the forest had gone back to its usual sounds, wind rustling through leaves, birds chirping, and the distant babble of water flowing over rocks. "I don't understand what just happened," Grace said as we reached the parking area. "Those sounds were driving me crazy for 2 days, and now they're just gone?" "Sometimes the forest plays tricks on people," I said. "Acoustics can be weird in dense timber." Grace shook her head. "This wasn't acoustics. Something was following me. Something was watching me." The pickup truck arrived right on schedule. I helped Grace load her gear and watched her drive away, still looking shaken but no longer terrified. I hiked back toward where we'd found the staircase, but there was nothing. No wooden steps, no disturbed ground, no sign that anything unusual had ever been there. Just pine trees and scattered needles and the normal sounds of an empty forest. Grace filed a complaint the next day about weird noises in Sector 4, but she kept the details vague. Smart woman. She knew nobody would believe what really happened. I updated my private notes that night, adding another incident to the growing list of things that couldn't go in any official report. The clicking sounds were new, but the behavior was the same. Something in the forest had been hunting Grace, using her fear to push her toward the staircase. At least this time, nobody had to climb those steps. I keyed my radio at 2:15 p.m. when the call came in about 7-year-old Amber Hughes, missing from a family picnic at Devil's Hollow for 2 hours, last seen wearing a red jacket and blue jeans. Copy that, dispatch. I'm 20 minutes out from Devil's Hollow. The family was gathered around their picnic table when I arrived, the parents talking quickly to a local police officer while an older woman held a crying toddler. Standard missing child scenario, except for the location. Devil's Hollow sat right at the edge of Sector 9, where the forest got thick and the terrain turned dangerous fast. Officer Martinez? I approached the cop taking notes. Ranger Dean. What's our situation? Parents turned around and the kid was gone. They've been calling for her, searching the immediate area. No response. I talked to the mother first. Amber had been playing near the creek while the adults set up lunch. When they looked up from unpacking sandwiches, she'd disappeared. The father had walked downstream for 50 yards in both directions. Nothing. She knows not to wander off, the mother kept saying. She's a good girl. She follows rules. 7 years old, same age as the boy from those old case files, though that had been Sector 7. Different area entirely. I pushed the thought away and focused on standard search protocol. I started at the creek bank where Amber was last seen. Small footprints in the mud led away from the water toward the tree line. The prints looked right, child-sized sneakers, the pattern matching what her father described. The tracks were easy to follow for the first 100 yards. Amber had walked in a straight line into the forest, not the wandering path you'd expect from a lost kid. No signs of running or panic, just deliberate movement deeper into the woods. I radioed my location and kept following the trail. The tracks went through some young pine trees, then across a small open area where they vanished on the packed dirt. I walked around the spot twice before finding the path again on the other side. 3 hours in, I saw the red jacket. A small figure stood perfectly still between two huge oak trees about 60 yards away. The right size, the right clothes. Amber's blonde hair caught the sunlight filtering through the branches. Amber? I called out. Honey, your parents are looking for you. The figure turned toward me. Even from that far away, something felt off about the movement. Too smooth. Too controlled for a scared 7-year-old. Amber, I'm a park ranger. I'm here to help you get back to your family. The kid started walking away from me, heading deeper into the woods, not running like a frightened child would, just moving forward with calm, steady steps. I followed, staying back while grabbing my radio. Dispatch, I've got eyes on the missing child. She's walking but won't respond when I call out. Need backup at my location. Static crackled back at me. I tried again. Same thing. The radio had worked perfectly back at the picnic area, but now I couldn't get through. The person in the red jacket kept walking, never turning around, never tripping on the uneven ground. They moved through thick bushes without touching branches, stepped over fallen logs without missing a beat. I stayed 50 yards back, following the small person as they took me on a twisting path through forest that got thicker and thicker. We walked for nearly an hour, them keeping the same weird pace while I had trouble keeping up over the rough ground. The trees got denser around us. Huge old pines blocked most of the sunlight, making it feel like dusk even though it was mid-afternoon. The air got noticeably colder as we went deeper into the hollow. Ahead of me, the red jacket vanished behind a group of large boulders. I picked up my pace, not wanting to lose sight of him. When I reached the rocks, the kid was nowhere to be found. I walked around the boulder formation twice, checking every gap and crack where a 7-year-old might squeeze through. The stones made a rough circle about 20 feet across, with several tight spaces between them. That's when I found Amber. Her body was wedged deep between two of the largest boulders, twisted at angles that made my stomach lurch. The red jacket was there, along with the blue jeans and small sneakers. But the corpse inside those clothes had been dead for weeks. Advanced decomposition, skin mottled and sunken. The smell hit me as soon as I got close enough to see clearly. This child had been dead long before her family reported her missing 2 hours ago. I backed away from the rocks, my hands trembling as I tried my radio again. Still nothing but static. The thing I'd followed through the forest hadn't been Amber Hughes. It had been something else wearing her appearance, leading me to this place where the real child's body waited. I forced myself to think through what this meant. If Amber had been dead for weeks, then what had her family seen at the picnic? What had they been calling for? What had they thought they were searching for? My radio buzzed as I walked away from the rocks. "Betty, this is dispatch. Do you copy?" "I copy. I need the coroner at my location, and I need the family moved away from the search area immediately." "Did you find her?" I looked back toward the rocks where Amber's real body lay hidden. "Yeah, I found her." The coroner arrived 2 hours later with a recovery team. I guided them to the boulder cluster but stayed back while they worked. Dr. Patterson confirmed what I already knew. The child had been dead for at least 3 weeks, maybe longer. "Cause of death?" I asked. "Hard to say with this level of decomposition. No obvious trauma. Could be exposure, could be something else entirely." I filed my report that evening, keeping to the basic facts. Child found dead in Sector 9, likely died from exposure after wandering away from family picnic. I didn't mention the part about chasing something that looked like her through the woods. Didn't mention the timeline that made no sense. Didn't mention the questions that would just put more people in danger. The family never got real answers about what they'd seen at Devil's Hollow. How could I tell them they'd been calling for something that was already gone? How could I explain that whatever responded to their voices wasn't their daughter? Some truths are too risky to tell. Some secrets keep themselves hidden for good reason. I locked the real details in my desk drawer with all the other cases that didn't add up. Another file that would stay buried. Another reminder that the woods keep their own rules, and we're just visitors trying not to become permanent residents. I was checking the perimeter fence near Moonrise Valley when I spotted Owen Campbell's flashlight bobbing through the trees ahead. He was moving fast, not the casual pace of a routine patrol. "Betty?" he called out when he saw my light. "Good timing. I need to run something by you." Owen looked exhausted. More than exhausted. He had that sharpness that came from handling things that defied explanation. "What's going on?" 3 separate incidents this week. All different hikers, all reporting the same thing. He pulled out his notebook and flipped to a marked page. Tall figure, maybe 7 feet, covered in dark hair, walks upright but moves wrong. And the eyes, they all mention red eyes. I kept my face blank. "What kind of encounters?" "Tom Rivera was camping with his girlfriend Sarah near Deadfall Ridge. She went to gather firewood and didn't come back. Tom started searching and heard her calling for help from deeper in the forest. Followed the voice for 2 hours, getting more and more lost. Owen stopped, glancing at his notes. The voice kept shifting around, always just beyond where he could see. Sarah calling his name, pleading with him to hurry up. But when he finally reached where the sound was coming from, he found this creature standing in a clearing, tall, covered in coarse hair, definitely not human. It opened its mouth, and Sarah's voice came out, asking why he'd taken so long to find her. Where was the real girlfriend? Back at camp. She'd returned with the firewood an hour after Tom left, and had been waiting for him ever since. I'd heard different versions of this story before, various names, other places, but always the same pattern. You said 3 incidents? Janet Morrison heard her dead father calling her name from a ravine in Sector 12. Followed the voice until she realized her father had been dead for 6 years. And yesterday, Mike Chen reported something that looked like a person, but moved like an animal, mimicking his brother's voice to lead him off the established trail. Owen shut his notebook. All 3 described the same creature. Same height, same build, same red eyes, and all 3 mentioned the voice mimicry. I'd seen references to this thing in old ranger logs going back 15 years, different sectors, different seasons, but always the exact description. The veteran staff had a name for it, though nobody used it in official reports. The Goat Man, I said. Owen nodded. Vernon Black brought up that name once, said he'd followed it to some cave system up near Eagle's Peak, but he won't say what he discovered there. Gets this expression on his face and switches topics. Vernon had 28 years in the service. If he didn't want to talk about something, there was usually a good reason. When do these sightings cluster? That's the thing. They always happen during seasons when we get multiple missing persons cases. Like whatever this thing is, it's actively hunting. I thought about the patterns I'd picked up over the years, certain times when the woods felt off, when the usual rules didn't seem to apply. The Goat Man sightings always happened during those stretches. What are you telling the hikers? Standard safety protocols. Travel in groups, stay on marked trails, carry emergency beacons, but I'm not sure that's enough. Owen was right. The usual procedures were built around typical predators that followed predictable patterns. This creature played mind games instead, twisting people's natural urge to help someone in trouble. Add this to your safety briefings, I said. If someone calls for help in the forest, don't respond unless you can actually see who's calling. Don't follow voices into unmarked areas, especially if the person calling sounds distressed, but you can't locate them visually. That goes against every rescue instinct people have. Which is exactly why it works as a hunting strategy. I checked my watch. The forest has predators that use tricks. Some copy sounds, some use visual deception. The smart hikers learn to verify before they respond. Owen jotted down notes while I spoke. Should we file official reports on these encounters? Document the basic facts. Hikers reporting unusual wildlife sightings in specific sectors. Leave out the voice mimicry details. Why? Because official documentation draws attention. Attention brings investigators, researchers, people who think they can solve mysteries that are better left alone. I started walking back toward the main trail. The more people who know about this thing, the more people will go looking for it. And the more people who go looking for it, the more people disappear. Owen walked alongside me. So we just let it keep hunting? We warn people without giving them enough information to get themselves killed. We establish protocols that keep hikers away from high-risk areas during active periods. And we accept that some things in the forest are older and smarter than we are. The beam of my flashlight caught something moving between the trees ahead. just a glimpse of a tall, dark shape before it disappeared back into the shadows. Owen saw it too. His hand moved instinctively toward his radio. "Don't," I said quietly. "Just keep walking." We kept walking down the trail without talking, both of us listening for anything that sounded wrong. Somewhere far off, a voice yelled out, high, desperate, definitely human. "Help me. Please, someone help me." Owen stopped walking. Every instinct told him to respond, to find where that terrified voice came from and help. "Keep walking," I repeated. The voice called again, much closer this time. "I'm hurt. I can't move. Please." Owen's jaw was set firm, but he stayed right behind me. We kept walking toward the parking area, while the voice kept calling from somewhere behind us, getting more frantic with every shout. When we finally made it to our cars, the woods had gone silent again. "That was the hardest thing I've ever done," Owen said. "It gets easier. Not easy, but easier." I climbed into my truck and fired up the engine. In my rearview mirror, I watched Owen standing next to his car, still looking back at the tree line where something was likely keeping an eye on us from the shadows. Some lessons you had to learn the hard way. But at least tonight, nobody had followed those voices into the woods. I was halfway through my morning coffee when the radio crackled to life with Ross Martinez's voice, strained with something I didn't like hearing from a veteran ranger. "Betty, we need you at grid reference 77 Alpha. Found our missing camper. Copy that. Condition." A pause that went on too long. "Dead. But Betty, you've got to see this for yourself." I grabbed my gear and took off, knowing that when Ross said I had to see something myself, it wasn't going to be simple. Beverly Johnson had been missing for 3 days, a 43-year-old librarian from Denver who'd been solo camping in Sector 12. She was an experienced hiker with good equipment and had left a detailed itinerary with her sister, the kind of case that should have ended with finding her hurt on a trail somewhere, not with Ross sounding like he'd just seen a ghost. I found Ross and Kyle Patterson standing at the edge of a small clearing, both staring up at something in the trees overhead. They looked like they'd been standing there for a while, trying to make sense of what they were seeing. "What have we got?" I asked, following their gaze upward. Kyle pointed to a huge oak tree about 40 yards away. "Beverly Johnson. She's up there." I squinted into the branches and spotted what looked like fabric caught in a hollow about 30 feet up the trunk. Red fabric that matched the description of Beverly's jacket. "How the hell did she get up there?" "That's what we've been trying to figure out," Ross said. He pulled out his binoculars and handed them to me. "Take a closer look." Through the lenses, I could see Beverly's body tucked into a natural hollow in the oak's trunk. She was positioned upright, almost like she was sitting in a chair, with her arms resting at her sides. Her hiking pack was still strapped to her shoulders. "Any climbing gear at her campsite?" "That's the other thing," Kyle said. "Her camp's about 3 miles south of here. Tent still set up, food properly stored, no signs of disturbance. Everything exactly where it should be for someone planning to return." I lowered the binoculars and studied the tree trunk. The bark was smooth and unbroken from ground level all the way up to where Beverly sat. No scratch marks, no disturbed moss, no sign that anyone had climbed up or fallen down. "You check for equipment she might have dropped?" Ross nodded. "Circled the entire area twice. No ropes, no climbing hardware. Nothing that would explain how she got up there." I walked closer to the base of the oak, looking for any sign of how Beverly had ended up 30 feet above ground. The tree was old growth, probably 100 years or more, with a trunk too wide for anyone to climb up even with proper gear. "What about the condition of the body?" Kyle checked his notes. "From what I can tell by the decomposition, She's been dead at least 2 weeks. Could be longer." 2 weeks? I stopped walking and turned back to them. "Her family reported her missing 3 days ago." "Yeah, that's another problem," Ross said. "Her sister filed the missing person report Tuesday morning. Said Beverly had called her Monday night to check in. Sounded fine. Mentioned she was having a great time." I felt that familiar sinking feeling that came with cases that didn't make sense. So either the family's timeline is wrong or something's been making phone calls pretending to be Beverly Johnson, Kyle finished. We stood there quietly for a moment, all of us knowing what that meant, but nobody wanting to actually say it. "I need to get a closer look at the body," I said finally. Ross had already called for specialized recovery equipment, but it would take hours to get a tree service crew out here with the right gear. In the meantime, I borrowed Kyle's binoculars again and got a better look at Beverly's position. She looked peaceful. That was the strangest part. No signs of trauma, no indication of struggle or panic. Her clothes were intact and properly arranged. Even her hiking boots were still tied up tight. "Ross, you said no signs of animal activity around the tree?" "None. No claw marks, no disturbed ground, no scavenger damage to the body. It's like she was just placed there. Placed there." That was exactly what it looked like. Someone or something had positioned Beverly Johnson in that tree hollow with the same care you'd use arranging flowers in a vase. "What's the official cause of death going to be?" Kyle shrugged. "Coroner will have to make that call. But from what we can see, no clear signs of injury. Could be exposure. Could be a medical emergency." "And the location?" "Accidental death during solo hiking," Ross said. "Hiker became disoriented, attempted to climb tree for better view or to escape wildlife, fell and became trapped in hollow." It was a reasonable explanation that would satisfy anyone who didn't dig too deep into the specifics. The fact that the tree couldn't be climbed and showed no signs of being disturbed would get lost in paperwork that nobody would bother reading. The recovery crew showed up just after noon with bucket trucks and specialized gear. I stood there watching them work, slowly pulling Beverly's body from the hollow while taking photos and recording measurements of everything. The coroner confirmed what we'd already figured. Beverly had been dead for about 2 weeks, with no injuries that matched climbing or falling. Cause of death would be marked as exposure, while they waited for more investigation. I filed my report that evening, sticking to the agreed-upon story. Solo hiker found deceased in tree hollow, apparent victim of disorientation and exposure. I left out the impossible timeline, the untouched campsite, the phone calls from a dead woman. Left out the fact that something in the forest had been pretending to be Beverly Johnson for 2 weeks, talking to her family while her body sat preserved in an oak tree like some kind of twisted trophy. The case was officially closed within a week. Beverly's family got their closure. Tragic accident, experienced hiker who made a fatal mistake. They never learned that their final conversations with their daughter had been with something else entirely. I locked the real details away with all the other files that didn't add up. Another reminder that the forest follows its own laws, and sometimes those laws include putting on human faces to make phone calls home. I was still finishing up reports from the Beverly Johnson case when Chief Morrison knocked on my office door and told me I had a new partner. Christian Dunn, fresh out of training. 25 years old with a degree in environmental science and absolutely no clue what this job actually involved. I requested to work alone, I said, not looking up from my incident report. Request denied. We're short-staffed and Dunn needs an experienced mentor. Morrison dropped a personnel file on my desk. Show him the ropes, Betty. Keep him safe. Keep him safe. Right. Like I'd managed to protect Melvin. Christian showed up the next morning looking like he'd walked straight out of a recruitment poster. Crisp uniform, shiny boots, gear belt arranged with perfect order. He had that bright-eyed confidence of someone who figured his classroom training had him ready for whatever came next. "Ranger Dean, I'm Christian Dunn. Looking forward to working with you." I studied his face, searching for any hint that he grasped what lay ahead. All I found was excitement and a fierce need to show what he could do. "We need to talk before we head out," I said. "There are things about this job that didn't get covered in your training." Christian grabbed his notebook, ready to jot down whatever came next. "What kind of things?" "The kind that keep you alive." I locked my desk drawer and stood up. "Let's walk." We headed out toward Sector 9, taking the long route through areas where I'd learned hard lessons over the years. Christian hit me with questions about patrol procedures, emergency protocols, wildlife management. Basic stuff that any ranger manual could answer. "Here's what they don't put in the manuals," I said when he finally stopped talking. "Sometimes you'll find structures in the forest that don't belong there. Wooden stairs, usually. If you see them, back away immediately and radio for support." Christian looked confused. "What kind of structures? Like old fire towers?" "No. Brand new construction that appears overnight in places where nobody could have built anything. Don't touch them. Don't climb them. Don't even get close enough to take pictures." "That doesn't make sense. How would new construction just appear?" I stopped walking and faced him. "It doesn't make sense. That's the point. When things don't make sense out here, you don't try to figure them out. You get away from them." Christian scribbled notes, but I could see the doubt in his eyes. "What else?" "If you hear voices calling for help from areas where you can't see who's calling, don't respond. Could be someone mimicking human speech to lead you off trail." "You mean like birds?" "Some species can imitate sounds." "Not birds." We kept walking toward the spot where I'd lost Melvin. "And if you ever feel like something's watching you, or the forest goes too quiet, or you get that feeling in your gut that says something's wrong, trust it. Turn around and head back to the main trail." Christian stopped writing. "Ranger Dean, are you talking about some kind of wildlife threat? Because my training covered predator encounters and your training covered normal predators following normal rules. What I'm talking about doesn't follow any rules you learned in school." I could see him trying to make sense of what I'd said, attempting to squeeze my warnings into his neat, scientific worldview. He was going to be trouble. We reached the spot where Melvin had died. The place looked calm now, just another section of woods with nothing to hint at what had happened here 3 months back. "This is where my last partner was killed," I said. Christian looked around the empty space. "What happened?" "Official report says he fell from a wooden structure that collapsed under his weight." "Where's the debris?" "Gone." Christian walked in a slow circle, looking over the ground. "I don't see any signs of building materials. No foundation marks, no scattered wood, no hardware." "That's because there's nothing left to see." "So what really happened?" I watched him hunt for logical explanations, checking distances and angles like he could crack the mystery through careful study. Same thing Melvin had tried. Something killed him. Something that shouldn't exist, but does anyway. And if you keep asking questions and looking for answers, it'll kill you too. Christian straightened up and faced me. "Ranger Dean, I get that you've been through trauma. Losing a partner is devastating, but we can't let fear stop us from doing our jobs properly." There it was, the same calm certainty that had gotten Melvin killed. "Here's how this partnership is going to work," I said. "When we're on patrol, you stay within arm's reach of me at all times. When I tell you to do something, you do it immediately without asking questions. When I say we're leaving an area, we leave. No discussion, no debate. That seems excessive. Those are the rules. Follow them or request a transfer. Christian thought about this, most likely weighing his career prospects against working with a paranoid veteran who'd obviously lost her edge. "I'll follow your protocols," he said finally. "But I'd like to understand the reasoning behind them." "The reasoning is keeping you alive long enough to make it to retirement." We walked back toward the main trail without talking. Christian kept looking around like he was memorizing everything he saw, building mental maps and noting potential dangers. Standard procedure for a new ranger learning his territory. He had no idea he was walking through a hunting ground where the predators used psychology instead of claws. "One more thing," I said as we reached the parking area. "Whatever you see out there, whatever happens during our patrols, the official reports stick to conventional explanations. Equipment failure, animal encounters, human error. Nothing about impossible structures or voices in the woods. Why? Because the more people who know about this stuff, the more people come looking for it. And the more people who come looking for it, the more people disappear." Christian nodded slowly, but I could see the questions building behind his eyes. He was going to be just like Melvin, too smart for his own good, too curious to leave mysteries alone. I climbed into my truck and started the engine. Through the windshield, I watched Christian standing beside his car, looking back toward the trees like he was already planning his return trip. Some people had to learn the hard way. I just hoped when Christian's lessons began, I'd be close enough to pull him back from whatever tried to teach him. I was explaining proper radio protocols to Christian when we rounded the bend on the main Sector 15 trail and found 15 wooden steps blocking our path completely. The staircase stretched from one side of the trail to the other, like someone had built a roadblock out of fresh lumber. Hikers would have to either climb over the thing or push through thick brush to get around it. "What the hell is that doing there?" Christian pulled out his camera and started taking pictures. I grabbed his wrist before he could get closer. "We need to back up and radio for support. Betty, this is blocking the main trail. Weekend hikers are going to run into this thing." He shook off my grip and walked toward the structure. "We can't just leave it here." The stairs looked just like all the others I'd seen over the years. Clean wood, perfect joints, not a scratch or weather mark anywhere. But this one was different, placed on purpose to make people have to touch it. "Christian, step away from those stairs right now. Look at this construction." He circled the base, examining the joints. "This is professional work. Someone transported materials and power tools out here to build this thing overnight." I grabbed my radio and tried calling dispatch. Nothing but static. Tried again. Same thing. The damn thing had worked perfectly 20 minutes ago when we checked in at the trailhead. "Our equipment's down. We're heading back to get backup." Christian looked at me like I'd completely lost it. "Betty, we're park rangers. Our job is keeping trails safe for public use. This thing is creating a hazard that we need to deal with. The hazard is the structure itself. We don't touch it. We don't climb it. We establish a perimeter and wait for specialized teams." "Specialized teams for what?" "It's a staircase." Christian put one boot on the bottom step. "I'm going up to check the stability and take measurements for removal." I lunged forward and grabbed his arm, pulling him back from the stairs. "Don't you dare." Christian stumbled backward but kept his balance. "You're being completely unreasonable. We have missing persons cases in this sector. What if someone's trapped on the other side of this blockage? Then they can walk around it. Through that terrain?" He pointed to the thick brush and fallen logs on either side of the trail. "A family with kids couldn't make it through there. An elderly hiker could get seriously injured. I tried the radio again. Still nothing but static. "We're leaving now." Christian shook his head and walked back toward the staircase. "I'm not ditching my duties because you're freaking out." "Christian, I'm ordering you to step away from those stairs. You're not my commanding officer. We're partners." He placed his foot on the first step again. "I'm going to climb up, assess the situation, and determine the best way to clear this obstruction." I reached for his arm, but he was already moving up to the second step. The moment his weight settled on the wood, his face completely changed. The doubt vanished from his eyes, replaced by a dreamy focus. "Christian, get down from there." He didn't respond, just kept climbing with robotic precision, like he was following instructions only he could hear. I ran after him, but hit the same invisible resistance I'd felt with Melvin. The air around the staircase felt thick and heavy, making every step forward a battle. "Christian, stop climbing." He reached the fifth step, then the sixth. His movements were too smooth, too controlled. Not like someone making conscious decisions about where to place his feet. I forced myself closer to the bottom of the stairs, fighting against the pressure that tried to push me back. Christian was on the seventh step now, almost halfway to the top. "Christian, look at me." For a second his eyes cleared and he looked down, confused and scared. His mouth opened like he was trying to speak. Then something huge and black dropped from above the staircase. I didn't think. I just threw myself up the stairs and slammed into Christian from behind on the eighth step. We crashed down hard, tumbling across pine needles and rocks as twisted claws slashed through the air where his head had been. Christian's ribs cracked when we hit the ground. I heard the sound clearly over his grunt of pain. My shoulder took most of the impact, but I kept rolling, pulling him away from where the steps had been. Where the steps had been. I looked back and saw nothing but empty trail. No wooden stairs, no disturbed dirt, no sign that anything had ever been there. Christian lay on his back, breathing shallow and clutching his side. Blood ran from a cut on his forehead where he'd smacked a rock. "What happened?" His voice was weak and confused. I remember walking towards something, then nothing. I checked his pupils. Both were wide, but they reacted to light. Probably had a concussion along with those busted ribs. "You fell and hit your head. We need to get you to medical." "Fell from what?" I helped him sit up carefully, watching for signs of internal bleeding. "Can you remember anything after we started down the trail?" Christian touched the cut on his forehead and winced. We were walking and talking about radio protocols. Then I'm on the ground, and everything hurts. My radio crackled to life. Dispatch asking if we copied. "This is Dean. I need medical evacuation at grid reference 44 Bravo. One ranger down with head injury and possible broken ribs." "Copy that. ETA 15 minutes. I looked back down the trail where the staircase had been. Just empty path stretching between the trees like nothing had ever been there. Christian followed my gaze. "What are you looking at?" "Nothing. Just making sure the trail's clear for the medical team." He nodded slowly, then closed his eyes and leaned back against a tree trunk. "I feel like I'm forgetting something important." "Don't worry about it. Head injuries can cause temporary memory gaps." The paramedics showed up on time and got Christian strapped to a backboard for the ride to the hospital. Concussion and 3 cracked ribs. But he'd be fine. When they asked what happened, I stuck to the usual story. New ranger slipped on rocky ground. I wrote up my report that night, noting a training accident during regular patrol. Partner got hurt taking a tumble on rough terrain. No mention of wooden steps or structures that disappeared when people came too close. Christian stayed in the hospital for 2 days and returned to work with doctor's orders to take things slow. He never brought up the lost time again, and I kept my mouth shut about it. But I caught him staring at that stretch of trail sometimes, like he was trying to remember something that stayed just beyond his grasp. Maybe that was for the best. Some memories were too dangerous to hold on to. I was finishing up the last of my gear inventory when the radio crackled to life. All units, we have a missing person report. Jeremy Black, 17 years old, last seen yesterday evening on the Clearwater Creek Trail system. Tiffany looked up from the map she'd been studying. That's Sector 7, right? My stomach dropped. Same sector where we'd found that boy with hypothermia 3 years back. Same creek, probably the same stretch of woods where something had kept a child alive for 3 days in conditions that should have killed him. Yeah, that's our sector. I grabbed my pack and radio. Let's move. We drove out to the trailhead in my truck, Tiffany asking solid questions about search protocols and grid patterns. She'd been with me for 2 weeks now and was learning quickly. Smart kid, good instincts, stayed calm when things got messy. 18 hours missing, she said, checking her notes. Temperature dropped to 32 degrees last night. If he's not properly equipped, we'll find him. I pulled into the parking area where 3 other ranger vehicles were already waiting. Remember what I taught you about hypothermia signs? Confusion, slurred speech, loss of coordination. He might not recognize us as help. Bradley Cox waved us over to where he was organizing the search teams. Parents say Jeremy's an experienced hiker, knows these trails well. He was supposed to be back by dark yesterday. Any idea why he was out here alone? Tiffany asked. Family says he wanted some time to think. Senior year stress, college applications, that kind of thing. Bradley spread out a topographic map. We're starting from his car and working outward in expanding circles. I looked over the map, seeing how near the search area was to where we'd found the other boy. Different trail, but the same general area. The same creek system ran through the whole sector. Tiffany and I will take the northern grid, I said. Radio check every 30 minutes. We headed into the forest with our assigned search area marked on GPS. Tiffany moved well through the terrain, checking spots where someone might take shelter or get lost. She was thorough without being slow, systematic, without missing obvious clues. Betty, look at this. She knelt beside a fallen log about a mile from the trailhead. Footprints in the mud here. I checked out the tracks. Had to be from hiking boots. About the right size for a teenage boy. The prints went off the main trail, heading toward the creek. Good eye. Let's follow them. The tracks led us through thick pine forest, staying roughly parallel to the water. Jeremy had been walking steadily, not wandering or doubling back like someone who was lost. The footprints showed he had a clear destination in mind. Radio's getting static, Tiffany said, trying to raise dispatch. I checked mine. Same problem. We were in a dead zone, which happens sometimes in the deeper parts of the forest. Nothing unusual about that. The tracks vanished when we hit rocky ground near the creek bank. Tiffany and I split up to search both directions, staying within sight of each other. Standard procedure for when you lose a trail. Over here, Tiffany called from downstream. I found her standing at the edge of a small clearing where Clearwater Creek made a sharp bend. Jeremy Black sat on a flat boulder beside the water, staring straight ahead with blank eyes. He looked exactly like the other boy had. Clean clothes even though he'd been out all night. No signs of panic or worry, just sitting there like he was waiting for something. Jeremy? Tiffany approached slowly, hands visible. I'm Ranger Adams. This is Ranger Dean. Your parents sent us to find you. Jeremy turned toward us, but his eyes didn't quite focus. Oh, hi. Are you hurt? Do you need medical attention? I don't think so. His voice was flat, emotionless. I'm just sitting here. I pulled out my thermometer while Tiffany kept him talking. His core temperature read 87 degrees, severe hypothermia, but he wasn't shivering or showing any of the signs that should come with numbers that low. Jeremy, do you remember how you got here? Tiffany asked. I was walking, then I was here. He looked around the clearing like he was seeing it for the first time. The fuzzy man said I should wait. Tiffany looked my way. I kept my face blank. Who's the fuzzy man? She asked. He stayed with me, kept me warm. Jeremy touched his jacket. He said someone would come get me. I radioed for medical evacuation, getting a clear signal now that we were back near the creek. This is Dean. We found Jeremy Black at grid reference 77 Charlie. Need immediate medical transport for hypothermia. Copy that. ETA 20 minutes. Tiffany wrapped Jeremy in an emergency blanket and got him to drink some warm water from her thermos. He went along with it but seemed completely out of it, like he wasn't really there. Jeremy, can you tell us about the last day? What do you remember? I was hiking. It got dark. He paused, like he was trying to access memories that weren't quite there. Then the fuzzy man came. He said I'd be safe. What did this person look like? Jeremy's forehead creased as he focused. Tall, covered in hair, nice eyes. He looked at Tiffany with sudden understanding. He wasn't scary. He was kind. The medical team showed up with a stretcher and warming equipment. They got Jeremy loaded up while checking his vitals and asking the same questions we'd already gone over. His temperature was coming up, but still way too low. Any idea how long he was exposed? The paramedic asked. Family says he's been missing 18 hours, I said. Found him conscious and responsive, but hypothermic. Lucky kid. Another few hours and we might have been too late. I watched them carry Jeremy toward the ambulance. Lucky wasn't the word I'd use. Tiffany and I walked back to the parking area where Jeremy's parents were waiting with bloodshot eyes and anxious expressions. His mother grabbed my arm the moment she spotted us. Is he okay? Where was he? He's going to be fine, Tiffany said. We found him by the creek. He's being taken to the hospital for observation, but his injuries aren't serious. What happened? How did he survive out there all night? Tiffany handled the questions perfectly, giving them enough information to feel reassured without getting into details that would worry them more. Natural shelter, mild weather, good outdoor skills. All technically true. I filed my report that evening, documenting a successful search and rescue operation. Teenage hiker found after 18 hours missing, treated for mild hypothermia, and released to family. No mention of body temperatures that defied explanation or mysterious protectors. Jeremy recovered completely within 2 days. When investigators asked about his missing time, he couldn't remember anything between starting his hike and sitting by the creek. The doctors said memory gaps were normal with hypothermia. 3 weeks later, I turned in my retirement papers. 23 years was enough. I'd lost Melvin to something I couldn't protect him from. I'd nearly lost Christian the same way. Now, Jeremy Black had run into the same thing that had taken care of that other boy, and I still didn't get what it wanted or why it picked certain people. But I knew one thing for sure. Whatever was out there in Sector 7, it had a system. It chose specific people for reasons I'd never understand. It kept them breathing when they should have been dead, then brought them back with missing memories and stories about some hairy protector. At least now it would be someone else's problem.